Right, I thought I'd make a short recording of putting the clutch back together into this engine. This is the stage I've got to so far. I've closed the cases. There's one or two things that need to be checked before I put the clutch basket in, but I just wanted to point out on this particular crankcase, the clutch basket has actually ground its way into the casing there. I don't know whether you can see that. We're going a bit closer with the camera. There you can see it there and down there in an arc there, and that's actually been done by the clutch basket. Let's set the camera up again. By this, which has gone on in the wrong order with the wrong washers and has gone too far, and obviously in use the last time has ground its way into the crankcase, and that probably happens quite a lot actually, because the manuals, the Haynes manual and the Yamaha manual and several others have got a washer missing from the sequence putting the clutch back together. So first of all, I'll just show you the way that the washers have got to go in order. The first washer to go on against the bearing is the 1mm thick small washer. That's a thrust washer. That goes on first against the bearing. Then there is the 2mm thick washer, and there are two of these, and they're both identical, same size. This one goes on later, or one of them goes on later with the clutch pat, the needle race, but this one needs to go on second, so that's number 2, and that's just a spacing washer, and those two washers together should give the correct spacing for the clutch basket. And in fact the next piece on is this, goes on next, and then the clutch basket sits on that. It's got a phosphor bronze bush in there, and that sits on next. Right, and now you should have sufficient clearance behind this, so that there's no dragging or friction anywhere on the crankcase. And I would recommend that you test that with the feeder gauge. Now, my feeder gauge has got largest one here is 0.040, which is 1mm actually. You need at least 1mm behind there, good clearance. And mine has got that 1mm clearance, because in operation there will be some slight movement obviously, and you do need a good tolerance there. I'm not sure what the measurement is, but it needs to be at least a millimetre. If you haven't got that, then there's something wrong with the washers. They're either worn out, or you've got the wrong washer on. You've got a thin washer instead of a thick washer here. Anyway, first things first, what you need to check before we get to this stage is that you've put the gear selector rod through and it's engaged in the star wheel here. Set that up with the screw here so that that is equidistant between the two tangs on that selector, so that when you change gear, what actually happens is that this moves and pulls it into gear like that. So the way to set that up is to put it in second or third gear, obviously not in neutral, and then make sure that the two tangs are equidistant by adjusting that screw there, and then that's set, that's fine. Make sure that's in. Make sure that you've got your crossover shaft in and the pinion on the end of the crossover shaft, which carries the drive from your starter motor through the engine case to this side. And also make sure that you've got the starter pinion on. That's a complete assembly there. It's quite complicated, and you need to make sure that it's on in the right order, and that the clip is in the right place in the crankshaft in there, in the crankcase in there. Make sure that you've put that screw on nice and tight. Check that. I would probably recommend you use some thread lock on that. And as I say, make sure you've got the half washers on here that locate that, and also the split washers and the circlip there on the end. You need to refer to a diagram to see that you've got that in the right way around. After that, those are the parts that you can't reach once the clutch case is in. And you also obviously want to make sure that the star wheel is on tightly, so check that it's nice and tight. And again, I would use you need to hold that in place to tighten that up. Use the lock, thread lock on that, I would. And also make sure that all these are tightened up and that they've got their tab washer over the end to stop them loosening up. Check your springs are okay. There's 2 springs in there, this one and that one. Make sure that they've got enough tension in them to operate. And that's that really. So then next step is, you've got the 2 washers on, put that bush on there, Won't hurt to put a bit of oil in here. Flush basket on. Next. So make sure it engages with the crank, and then, as I say, check your clearance behind. I mean, once it's tightened up, you'll have a little less, but at least I can see at the moment that I've got at least 1mm clearance, which should be sufficient. Next thing on is your clutch pack. Now, this is where the missing washer is, I think, but I've gone for a new clutch pack, and this is from Yambets. This cat fur is not obligatory. You can have some cat fur if you want, or not, depending on whether you've got cats, I suppose. First goes this washer here. It's a thin 1mm thick washer, and then is your needle bearing race. They come as a pack in a kit, like that, but there also should be a second 2mm thick washer with a smaller diameter. You can note the diameter difference between them. That goes on first, the thin washer, and it should sit over the top of the end of that spigot, and your needle race goes on next, and again that should sit on top of there, look, like that, and then this goes on last, which holds them in place like that. That's number 7. Then it is 8 was 8. Here's this bit, here it is. That's next. Now this part that holds the actual drive plates, you need to be aware that there's a small indentation somewhere around the circumference, just here, I've marked it in red. Make sure that you line that up with the cover that goes on later. So that goes on next, like that. And when this cover goes on later, when you've got all the plates in, that hole must line up with that little indentation on there. And that's how it's balanced when it's manufactured and put together. I don't know whether it's critical or not, but that's what Yamaha recommend. And the reason for it, they say, is because that's balanced as a pack, the whole thing. And when you look at the centrifugal mass of that, it's quite a big mass. I suppose it must have some effect on vibration and what have you. So that's next. And then we've got the lock tab washer. You see there's got 2 tabs there. They go on in those little indentations there. You can't get that the wrong way around. Then you've got a plain washer. And then you've got the lock nut there. And obviously when that's torqued up to the correct torque, which you'll have to refer to in the handbook because I haven't got it handy at the moment, then you bend those tabs over to lock against the nut so that it can't come undone. So you lever those up either side around and hammer them into the nut to stop it from turning. And then is the clutch plates. Now with the clutch plates, I've got a pack of 7 thrust plates here and 6 steel plates. This is a later type. The original had 6, I think, but with these you want to make sure that a thrust plate goes on first and last. They should always be on the outside, one of these, so you can't go wrong. So what I've done before, I've put this together, I've actually filed inside these sections here where the tangs of the first clutch plates go in, so that they release nicely, so when you're actually in operation, these will slide nice and smoothly. Eventually, when they get worn, you get indentations in these, and those indentations actually cause drag and friction, which stops your plates separating properly, and that's one of the most common causes, the plates not separating properly along with oil. So that's very important. Next, steel plate, friction plate, and then obviously alternate with the driving plates, and you put all those on until you should end up with final drive plate. Right, I'm not going to put them all on at the moment just to demonstrate this. But then this goes on and you make sure that you line up the hole with the indentation like that, and then before you do that you put this piece in and a rod. Now, I'm using a long rod. I've changed it from the 2-piece rod to a single piece. Or I need a ball bearing. in there, and I've gone for a new ball bearing because the others were rusty. Ball bearing in there. The thin end of this long rod must go in first because that's what goes into the worm drive. Here, that actually fits into there. You get it the wrong way round, it won't work properly, it won't go in the hole and it won't work. The clutch won't function. It's got to go that way round with the thin end in first. So that follows the ball bearing. Push it right through and just push it gently through the oil seal the other side. And then you put a ball here. And then this piece goes on last, which is the bit that actually presses your clutch in and out. Just make sure that's gone through the oil seal. That's that. Right, then we've got this on, lining up those two holes like that, and line up through there, and then of course you've got your springs on. I'll tighten those up. Now you can change these for Allen key types, which actually is quite handy. They're much stronger and easier to fit. I'm just going to be a lazy arse and do this with this drill. And obviously you've got to fit the others one as well on there, and that basically is it. You just got to make sure that everything that you've done behind there in sequence before you put that on, obviously, otherwise you're going to have to take the whole thing off and do it again. That's that.